I'm Elizabeth DeFaber, and you're watching 30 Minutes with Elizabeth DeFaber. Tonight we're here with Assemblyman Greg Ball. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Very good.
How's it going?
Very good. So you were here recently with me, and we discussed a few topics. And so tonight,
Tough questions.
I don't think I was tough enough, honestly, actually. So I think I may have to be tougher.
Live to see another day.
So now we're past the primaries, and so this is the big deal now.
That's right.
So
November
let's talk about
2nd, right?
You got it.
Yep.
Let's talk about some bigger issues that are facing, let's say, Westchester County right now.
Sure.
Affordable housing settlement.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first, people need to realize that the affordable housing settlement that came down from the federal government, but was voted on in support by my opponent, is a huge unfunded mandate, over $60 million that will be shouldered by Westchester County taxpayers who are already taxed beyond any imagination. And even though the local politicians are saying that, oh, no, don't worry about it, we need affordable housing, we do need affordable housing for our seniors. We need to make sure that we have workforce housing for our cops and our firemen and our EMTs, the people who help build our communities. But this federal affordable housing debacle is for many out-of-state and out-of-county residents, and will not be available to taxpayers in Westchester County. So it's an abomination, and we've got to make sure. Many local politicians had their head in the sand about the affordable housing initiative. The fact that the individual that I'm running against, that he would vote for it and hopes to now represent Northern Westchester, when we're the ones who are going to be targeted by this federal mandate, at the very least he should have fought and voted against it. And now we've got to make sure in implementation that we're not unfairly targeted, and that this mandate meets all the environmental, health, and safety standards of any other project that has to go through the approval process.
Don't you think with the title affordable housing, don't you think that it gets a bad rap, I feel, with that name, affordable housing? Well, you just said though, workforce housing. Yeah. I think when you say that, people look at it differently.
Well, there are two very different things.
Mm-hmm.
This federal mandate, actually, if you read it, my opponent should have read it before he went and voted for it. It mandates that low-income individuals from outside of Westchester County will be targeted, and Westchester County taxpayers are going to be paying to market this affordable housing in places like the Bronx and elsewhere to low-income communities and to people who do not pay taxes in Westchester County. Mm-hmm. And for low-income seniors or moderate-income seniors, for working families that are struggling,
someone like myself,
you wouldn't even be allowed on the list. So it's unfair, and we've got to make sure that places like Lewisboro, Bedford, Pound Ridge, the town of Somers, Yorktown, that we're protected during implementation. And meanwhile, my opponent's going around saying, "Oh no, don't worry about it. It's going to be for cops and firemen in Northern Westchester." It's a lie. And I think that this election cycle, if people were ever tired of the rhetoric and the lies, it's this year.
So how do you think, though, we're going to be able to get out of having that mandated in these certain towns that have been targeted, like Lewisboro and Bedford and Pound Ridge?
I can tell you, as hopefully with the support of the people as next state senator, that I'll do everything I can from the state level to work with the county executive and Rob Astorino to fight this settlement tooth and nail legally. And then I will make sure that as this federal mandate is unveiled, unlike my opponent who has his head in the sand, who voted for it, and is now lying about it, saying it's going to be for Northern Westchester cops and firemen, which is a bold-faced lie, that I'll work as a state senator with the local communities to force the federal government through mitigation, through communication, to detail their plans and to make sure that our concerns are met and that communities like Lewisboro, like Bedford, like Pound Ridge, like the town of Somers are not unfairly targeted.
Another unfairly targeted issue throughout this election is the MTA payroll tax.
Right.
Explain that to me, and explain to me and our viewers also what you have actually started doing about this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you talk about taxation without representation. The MTA payroll tax is quite possibly the final nail in the coffin for a lot of small businesses. But people think because it's a payroll tax, it's only small businesses, and that's not the case.
Self-employed individuals?
Self-employed nonprofits. So the Girl Scouts of the Hudson Valley, who've never paid any tax like this before, are now forced to pay tax. The Devereaux School, which assists children with autism and their families. Nonprofits like that, the Devereaux School had to cut a check for over $50,000.
That's a teacher's salary.
It's a teacher's salary or more in a nonprofit like that. And they're really providing services to, if you have a child with autism, it's tough enough to raise a child, like me, right, growing up. Lord knows my mom deserves
Sure you were an angel.
Absolutely not. Deserves a Purple Heart and a Congressional Medal of Honor. The typical family that has a child with autism, they'll spend 1,000 hours per year in addition, trying to just provide basic services. They're in a perennial fight with the school district just to provide basic services for their child. And studies show that they'll spend over $2 million more just trying to provide the basic needs to their child. So to think that we would unfairly burden and tax nonprofits that are trying to protect, and it's battered women's shelters, it's Park, it's Devereaux, it's everything. And meanwhile, those dollars are going to a defunct, corrupt authority in the MTA. They are spending millions of dollars on marketing campaigns, millions of dollars on expense accounts. They're spending tens of millions of dollars to build a doghouse in southwestern Dutchess County. There is corruption, including mob infiltration. This is not conspiracy theory. This has been well documented, dating down to projects, including their opening of their headquarters on Broadway. They have project overruns to the tune of 800%, 900%. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in project overruns. No transparency, no accountability. And now we are supposed to pay places like Park and Northern Westchester Women's Center and Devereaux Learning Center and small businesses and the self-employed, entrepreneurs are supposed to be paying for that. I don't think so. So I'm fighting for a full repeal of the MTA payroll tax. I've actually worked with counties like Nassau County, Orange County, Putnam County. Now Westchester County is getting on board. Hopefully Dutchess County will get on board soon to join in a constitutional fight to prove that this is an unconstitutional tax and to get a full repeal of this tax.
And you have a proposal to privatize the MTA, correct?
I would like to see at least portions of the MTA be privatized and to put together I'm not one for blue ribbon panels because, the last thing we need is a committee to decide if we should have a committee to decide if we should have a committee. And, I hate the blue ribbon panels in many instances on school tax reform. If we need another blue ribbon panel to tell us that we need to cap property taxes, free school tax for seniors, eliminate unfunded mandates, and move towards an income model, I don't know why. I mean, we know that we have a school tax crisis in the state. But on the MTA, I would like to see a panel of experts and elected officials who come together from both sides of the aisle to consider privatizing large chunks of the MTA, because the authority that is running it now is simply corrupt. It is financially mismanaged, and it really is a violation of the public trust.
So what about the municipal bonds the MTA took out? How would you deal with that then?
I think that we have to look towards some sort of public-private partnership, not to bore people at home, but we have to look towards some sort of public-private partnership as other states and other countries have done. New York State represents one of the largest consumer economies in the world if it was set aside by itself. The reality is that the MTA is spending taxpayer dollars like there's no tomorrow. There is a tomorrow. The bill is due, and they're doing it on the backs of future generations. And I really believe that through either a limited or pretty comprehensive privatization, you could see better service, up to 30% savings in efficiencies across the board.
And you were talking about the suit that Westchester County, you said, joined with Nassau?
Westchester County is not on board. Nassau County will be spearheading the suit. I'm working to get Orange County on board. Putnam County has promised to come on board. And just recently, the comptroller agreed. I've been fighting now for over a year for a criminal accounting of the MTA. And the comptroller just a couple weeks ago promised to do that forensic accounting. That's a huge win. This lawsuit.
So how do you think that's going to benefit the
Well, I
forensic
mean,
accounting?
at the end of the day,
What do you
there's-
think is going to come
when
out?
they have projects that have overruns to the tune of $700-800 million.
Yes.
So we can find waste, fraud, and abuse in the MTA and save taxpayer dollars. They came to the New York State Legislature and asked for a bailout. If you remember that over the summer.
Yes.
So they're asking for a bailout of over $1 billion, and meanwhile you find out that they have $1 billion in cost overruns. So there needs to be a forensic accounting. We have to stop bailing out a corrupt authority, and we have to fight not only because the governor agreed to do a partial repeal of the MTA payroll tax. We got to fight for a full repeal, because at the end of the day, none of these things. All those tolls that were supposed to go away once the bridges were paid for. It's the same thing with the MTA
Or
payroll
the fare
tax,
hikes that
right?
just continually go up.
Exactly. So these taxes never die. They're like vampires. So we've got to do everything we can to kill this MTA payroll tax now. And if we don't do it now, it's not going to happen.
Now, what I don't understand about the issue is, though, the communities along the commuter transportation district, the MTA commuter transportation district, these are the small businesses, the self-employed, the schools, even the nonprofits that are paying this payroll tax. When they don't rely on the MTA system for their employees to.
Did you take a train to get here?
No, I did
I
not.
didn't take a train to get here.
But for somebody who works in New York City that lives, say, in northern Westchester or, in Putnam County, they're taking the train into the city. Why would the city employees, the employers in the city, why would they not be held liable for
I
this?
think at the end of the day, and where you're going is where some of the legislature like to go too, which is why not, maybe the tax could be taxed on somebody else. I think at the end of the day, instead of saying we need a new tax to keep up with the spending of the MTA, we've got to look at the MTA and tell them, you've got to get your spending in line, right? Because solving a tax problem with another tax doesn't help. Just like there are legislators that came out and said, oh, well, let's tax Connecticut. If we're going to tax the Hudson Valley, let's tax Connecticut. How about we get the MTA in line? How about we consider privatization? How about we do a forensic accounting? And how about we cut down on some of the expenditures and some of the corruption, some of the waste? That's really what we need to do.
Another tax is just going to cause another problem for
Exactly.
somebody else.
Yep, in a state that is already overtaxed.
You're exactly right. Let's turn to the issue of renewable energy. Tell me something about that. And let's talk about Indian Point, for example.
Okay.
I had this question. Has anybody ever banned airplanes flying in the sky?
No, I have not.
The issue about Indian Point I find
Right.
to be very interesting because it's always thought of as a potential terrorist target.
Right.
Isn't an airplane flying in the sky a potential terrorist target?
Yeah, I mean, the issue of from a national security perspective, the issue of having a nuclear power plant within such close proximity of millions of people is one that we should take seriously.
Of course.
And as legislators and as a community, we should petition our federal government, and really it should have been a priority under the Bush administration, and it should be a priority under the Obama administration, because if you remember after 9/11, it looked like there were Humvees, well equipped, with devices to shoot down, whether it be a plane or whatever it is, that were stationed outside of Indian Point. I don't see them anymore. Yet, in my opinion, we're no more secure in many instances, maybe in some, many years after 9/11 than we were then, in the broad perspective, not only as it deals with Indian Point. So if we want to make sure that we're secure, that's a great argument. Let's do that. Let's petition our federal government to make the protection of Indian Point a priority.
Exactly.
Okay? But my Democratic opponent has come out and said, well, we should replace it with windmills.
That's
you
not
would need
logical
windmills
around
from here probably to the Galapagos Islands in order to replace Indian Point. And forget about the thousands of high-paying jobs that Indian Point creates. So I would like to see, and I believe that renewable energy, we've got to make sure that nuclear has a portion of the dynamic mix that would make up our ability to rely upon renewable energies. It would make sense, France has over 50 nuclear power plants. They're a net exporter of energy. They rely upon nuclear energy. There's no reason why, in less populated areas in upstate New York, we wouldn't be able to build other nuclear power plants. But the suggestion that we can close down Indian Point tomorrow, it's not economically feasible.